one thing that's interesting is it seems to me that only mad dogs, Englishmen, and teachers could have imagined having a rally at noon in Washington, D.C. in the middle of the summer. But I'm willing to be a mad dog and a mad teacher. There are some advantages to being very old, or old, even just old. And that's you've been there before. And of course, as Diane Ravitch reminded us yesterday, this is about even in my one limited life, about the fifth major crisis caused by teachers. And, but I do think there is something special about this crisis. We are in a crisis, but not the one they're talking about. We're in a crisis about human relationships and a crisis about the survival of democracy. That is what we are fighting for. The word public is even in the word republic, remind me. There can't be a republic if there isn't a public, and there can't be a democracy if there isn't a republic. Now, the latest great idea for solving the school problem is by abolishing it. Just remember, that is what we are fighting, is for saving the idea and the existence of a public school system in the belief that that the only alternative we're being offered is one we know whose faults are greater still. And that is a marketplace unevenly stacked between competing consumers. That's what's being offered to replace the public school system. And there couldn't be a worse idea. At least some of those who are most active in proposing this idea are the very people who created the last crisis of the free marketplace. Isn't that intriguing? And they hope to use it to increase their power, not to increase our power. And they even do it. This is what infuriates me the most. They do it in the name of civil rights. This last economic crisis wiped out virtually half of the wealth that existed in the black community. Built up after the last 40 years, wiped out in the housing crisis. We have done more damage to the poor, to the black and Latino communities in this last crisis than, believe me, I did in first grade. Yes, it's a distraction, but worse than a distraction. This reform movement is undermining everything that I think I have spent the last 80 years, I started at birth, the last 80 years struggling for. Only Russia today has a greater concentration of wealth than the United States. Think of that. Only Russia has a greater concentration of wealth. Only Mexico in the European and American world has a higher percentage of children living in poverty. We're a little bit ahead of Mexico and way behind the rest of our competitors. And we wouldn't be facing any of this crisis about budgets next year if those top 1% who control 25 to 30% of our wealth paid the same taxes that you and I pay. We are at fault, however, for something. We should have started this much earlier. But every single one of us is at fault for not having done that. Thank God that a few people suddenly said, let's start even if it's the middle of the summer, even if we don't know what we're doing, even if we won't get the millions we would like to get. You have to start. All of us start. Schooling is, and I think our joint motto is schooling for ruling. We want a schooling system that teaches us all how to be the rulers of our own nation. And to do so, we need a reform movement that helps, thank you, that helps democratize, not privatize, the schools we have, who are flawed. They're flawed by not being democratic enough, rather than being flawed by not being privatized enough. Listen, we're a motley crew, and one of the other things I've learned by age is to stop fighting against the things I can't change, like my big feet. I used to dream of having long, straight hair that would gracefully float in the wind. And now I make the most of having, a mop. We got to make the most of who we are. We may be splintered. I'm speaking on behalf of 3 or 4 different organizations, each of which is in a state of crisis itself. But that's our plus. We're used to that. And we're not going to wait for some foundation to provide us with the funds. We can unite. Yeah, I'm just almost finished. To find some common demands, and each in our own way, we can do the job. And I want to say one final personal word. I have been extraordinarily lucky. I've had 45 to 50 years of living within classrooms and schoolhouses in America's public urban schools. And they have been the greatest experience in my life. And I fear that there will be few of you younger people who will be able to say that if we stop taking teachers seriously. So I thank you for having given me this. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Deborah Meier. And if we all would just look over, a word from our friend and friend of the march, John Stewart.